from his home outside of Gainesville, Florida. It's great to have with us our special media guest, Andy Staples, the writer for The Athletic. Andy, welcome back to the show. It's been a number of years. Great to have you back.
Well, thank you, Eli. I really appreciate it.
And joining us from his home here in Tuscaloosa, Crimson Tide head coach Nick Saban. Hello, Coach. How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm missing everybody. I wanted to be there. You know, I enjoyed it last week when I got out of the house.
Yeah.
So now I'm stuck here.
I hear you. How you feeling? You doing okay?
Doing great. I don't have any symptoms. I don't have a fever. You know, they do all those oxygen tests and all that stuff, and everything's normal. So I feel great. Don't have any problems. Been able to do everything that I would do if I were working from here because of Zoom, whether it's be in the meetings, watch the film with the coaches, watch the practice film, have communication on the field that I can still correct players, you know, and the special teams meeting and the defensive meetings and offensive meeting after practice. So I've done everything that I would normally do. I just have to do it from here for now. So
technology is amazing, isn't it?
Sure is. I mean, it's a godsend that we have the ability to do the things. It was the same way in recruiting this year, just a lot of different circumstances that we've had to deal with, and the technology has helped us be able to get through it.
Exactly. Coach, you know Andy Staples, of course, one of the best sports writers out there. Andy, feel free to jump in with a question for the coach.
Well, I got to ask you this because you've never struck me as the kind of person who would enjoy being stuck at home. How are you handling that aspect of it where you're not supposed to leave?
I had a meeting with the leadership group today, and I told them, I said, you know, it's really been tough for me. I said, I'm getting beat up on both ends. I said, when I come there, I can raise hell with you guys. And now I'm here with Miss Terry, and she's raising hell with me. So I'm losing out on both ends. But
anyway, as somebody who's worked out of the house for about 20 years, welcome to my world. When you're working from home, nobody realizes you're still actually working.
Yeah, but you know what? It's a really different mindset when you work at home. And I sort of probably could use some coaching pointers from you relative to that, because it seems like, you know, when you get in your car and you go to work, your mindset is I'm going to do this, 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 and this all day today. And you all got it kind of mapped out. And when you stay at home, it's like, I'm supposed to be doing some of the stuff I do at home. So I haven't done anything that I normally would do at home. So you just got to get it. You got to train yourself to be able to stay focused on what you're doing. It's a lot more difficult to me when you're at home than it is when you go to work.
You got to be really disciplined.
There are more distractions.
We're really disciplined. Yeah, I get that.
Definitely.
We need to get you one of the doors, the remote control doors for your office at home, though.
I'm not that lucky.
I hear you. I found it interesting, Coach, and we can expound a bit, and then I want to shift over to the Georgia game. But I found it interesting to hear you say that you were able to see so much more on an all 22 camera that you had access to, as opposed to just standing with the DBs or whatever you're doing. I found it interesting that you were able to take in more of the practice than you would have normally as it was happening.
Well, it is when you get the view from 1,000 feet, which is kind of, you know, we've got these towers and they're shooting the thing, and it's like watching game film. But when you're actually watching practice, you know, you can't say, hey, run that back again, like you can when you're watching a film. So you only see certain things and you watch certain parts of certain things, and that's how we kind of split up as coaches. So we have eyes on everything. Like I usually coach the front side of the defense, and the other coaches are on the back side of the defense. And, you know, the linebacker coach is coaching the middle of the defense. So, but when you got the big picture, you can kind of see a lot more, and you see a lot more because you're seeing the big picture rather than specific things. So it was a little interesting, and I guess that's why Coach Brian always stood up in that tower.
Yeah, definitely. We're visiting, of course, with Coach Nick Saban, and our special media guest is Andy Staples from The Athletic. Of course, Saturday, Bama and the Georgia Bulldogs, presented by Coca-Cola. Coverage on the radio begins at 4 with kickoff at 7 o'clock. And one thing that hasn't changed, Andy, since you were last on the show many years ago, our first question and caller is always brought to us by Alabama 811. Always contact 811 before you dig to know what's below. Call 811 or visit al811.com. Pee-wee from Grand Bay, Alabama. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, Eli. Coach, you're looking good, sir. Just to let you know, we all got you, Greg Bine, all the staff, both of your families, everybody in our prayers.
I appreciate that. And, I'd like to say that I appreciate the support from so many people from all over the United States. Phone calls, text messages, emails have been wonderful. I mean, it's very uplifting that the relationships that you've made through the years, and so many people would be concerned about your well-being, and I really appreciate it, and I want everybody to know that. But go ahead. I appreciate you too.
Coach, the past game, the offense had the line had a little bit of a breakout. Najee was able to run for 23 times, 200 and plus yards, plus I don't remember the exact total of the rest of the rushing yards. But how important in this game against Georgia's defensive line, which the opportunity that I get to see them play, these guys are very good, of being able to run the ball, to have a balanced offense this week against them?
Well, I think it's very important, but I think you hit the nail on the head. This is a very good defensive team. They're a veteran team. They have a lot of experience. They've got they play more than two inside players that are really, really hard to block and hold the point very well. They've got some edge rush guys. They got a very good secondary. Their linebackers are very fast and active. So this is a really good defensive team. And I think the numbers and the statistics for 3 games really bear it out that they're one of the top defensive teams in the country. They're very well coached. They have really good players. Kirby does a really good job with them, and they play really, really well. And I think it's going to be really important for us to be able to create some balance so that we can, put them in some situations and not be behind the sticks all the time, because that's when they play a lot of players. I mean, when they put their subs in on third down, there's like 6, 7 different guys come in. So they play a lot of different players. They have a lot of depth, and they all play well, and they don't make a lot of mistakes. So it's going to be important for us to do a great job of executing, run and pass. And we got to block them when we try to pass too, because they got some pretty decent rushers.
We got a question sent in from the Nick Saban Show blog on AL.com. James is down in Foley, Alabama. And he said, hey, Coach, Georgia, as we just talked, has a top-ranked defense. Do you see some similarities to Kirby's defenses here at Alabama when he was your coordinator?
Yeah, there's some similarities. I think they've progressed, and they do some things that are, a little more unique than what we did back in that time, because it's been about 5 years ago. But, we had those kind of players, on defense, and we did a lot of the same basic things. I think they've added some things that, especially on third down, that have been very effective for them. But it's like, we do the same thing here. We're always trying to add and, sort of figure out a better way, whether it's offense, defense, special teams, or whatever. You don't change the basic way that you do it. I mean, they're basically 4 down, 4-2, and they slide the front to a 3-4, even in nickel, kind of like what we do. And they do a really good job of it. They do a lot of stemming. It's going to be really important for our offensive line because they stem a lot up front to be able to ID the fronts correctly. And they get a lot of people to jump off sides with their stemming. So that's one of the things that we work really hard on, because if you get behind on the sticks, that's when they're most effective.
Andy, jump on in, sir.
Well, you mentioned the stemming, and I always think that's very interesting because if you think about it, you're an offensive lineman, especially a center, where you've got to worry about snapping the ball, and then you've got these 300-pound monsters just moving around a few seconds before the snap. How important is it to have a veteran line, a smart line, where those guys can diagnose immediately what the new front looks like and now what they must have to do to block it?
Oh, I think it's really important. I don't think if you have a good center who can ID the mic and understand what they're going to do when they stem, and these guys don't just stem. A lot of people that stem, they'll go from 40 to odd and odd to 40, but that's basically it. These guys will stem and then they'll still stunt you. And that makes it even more difficult. So that's going to be the challenge, for the offensive line. But I think having some veteran guys up there that have some experience will be helpful to us. But we've got to be able to move these guys a little bit. If you don't get moving in a running game, it's hard to create space for the runner. So whether they move or not, that's going to be a challenge for us as well.
Coach, a little football 101 for some of our listeners. Stemming, stunting. Explain those terms to our viewers and listeners.
Well, probably different people have different terminologies, but stemming means that you line up in one front, and on a signal, most of the time from a linebacker, you will move to another front. All right, so let's just say you line up in odd, and then you say move and you stem to even. All right,
Okay.
so that's one part. That's stemming. That's moving the front, changing the front dynamic. But then when you stunt, like they do a lot of corner cats, where the corner comes and the whole line slants. So if you have a veteran team, you can do that and then still do a stunt, because that's not always easy to time up and execute defensively. But I think they have a veteran group on defense. So I don't know, they have 8 or 9 starters back from last year, and they play a lot of guys. So even some of the guys that weren't starters have played a lot. And so they do both. And that's stunning means you're going to maybe slant, plug a backer on this side, bring somebody off the edge, slant the front, maybe slant the front, bring an edge guy and a backer, bring both inside backers. So there's a lot of movement that can create negative plays if the offensive line really doesn't get a hat on a hat when they start doing this kind of stuff.
Pistol formation. Give Najee left side. Big seal block. He's to the 20, to the 10, to the 5. He lunges forward. Touchdown, Alabama. 33 yards. Najee Harris, one of his 5 touchdowns. But, Coach, in the course of that play-by-play, I talked about a great block on the edge there. And as we've all seen over the years, if guys don't block for you, they don't play for you. And we got some really good perimeter blocking against Ole Miss.
Well, we did. I think our receivers did a really good job of, tying their people up, and we could, some of the bubble passes and screens and things that we threw turned into being explosive plays. I think we had like 21 explosive plays in the game. So they did a really good job on the perimeter as well as the interior. So I don't think you have the kind of game we had where you don't do that. Now, on the other side of the ball, we got a little discombobulated with the speed of the game. They were going fast. I think they made 4 fourth down conversions going fast, in the game. We had problems getting lined up at times. So that kind of pace of play with some young players in some positions, really, really difficult. We didn't tackle great in the game. I don't know if the field had something to do with that, but we didn't tackle very well. So those are things that we definitely need to improve on, and they're all correctable things. So hopefully we'll have a chance to use those things to get better.
Andy Staples is our media guest. Go right ahead, sir.
I'm curious. There were several times in that game where they went from a third to a fourth down, and there was not the usual where you see the offensive lineman pointing, "Hey, let's go for it, let's go for it." It was they instantaneously knew we are going for this. We're getting lined up. There was one situation where they went from a 3rd and 5 to a 4th and 1, and they switched from a 2-by-2 set to a 3 receivers and an attached tight end on one side of the line of scrimmage, and then nobody on the wide side of the field. And they did that in 7 seconds. How hard is that to defend when they can line up in 7 seconds like that and go for a 4th down?
Well, it's difficult. First of all, you got to make a call on defense. We anticipated in doing it, but still, you got to make a call on defense, and then you got to look at the formation. And they were putting all 3 receivers into the boundary and the tight end into the boundary. We call those unbalanced formation service stations, Texaco, Exxon, different things like that. But and if the corner had to go over to match up, he's standing over there to the field. He has to get into the boundary before they snap the ball. So it almost takes 7 seconds for him to get over there, and they're already running the play. So it's really well designed, smart, on their part. Not a lot of people go fast anymore. So players aren't used to that either. But it was effective, very effective for them.
Now, Georgia's a team that won't do that as much, and they will try to limit the amount of plays that get run, maybe to keep their defense fresh. Is that just the give and take and push-pull that you as coaches have to negotiate now?
Well, I think Georgia will go fast in some situations. Made a big play, maybe at first down,
Right.
maybe if you're substituting personnel or something like that. It's not their MO, to go fast. I agree with that. I don't think they really try to slow the game down. I think, they do want to control the ball on offense, run and pass, and they have really good balance, in what they do on offense. But the fact that they keep the ball for 34 and a half minutes a game, I think that's like in tops in the country. But you got to be able to execute the play so that you can keep the ball, and you got to do a good job on 3rd down, when those 3rd downs come up, to keep the ball. That's probably been one of our biggest issues this year, is we don't get off the field on 3rd down, like we have in the past. And especially when you play against a fastball team, you got a chance to get off the field on 3rd down. They make a 1st down, they're going fast again. So these drives get extended, and you can't substitute very much unless they substitute. So players get tired. They don't get lined up as quickly. It's a huge advantage when you go fast, but your team has to be geared toward that as well. Now, there is some question, and when we played a little more ball control around here and had really, really good defensive teams that were always ranked in the top 5 in the country, they didn't play as many plays as what our guys play now. Because we play faster on offense. We make more explosive plays. So there's a trade-off there. I always think if you play good defense, that's always going to keep you in the game. You're always going to have a chance to win. But sometimes lately we've had to outscore them, and we certainly had to do that last week. It's not the way I'd like to be able to play. I like it when you have an explosive offense and you play good on defense as well. But and I think we'll get better on defense. I really do. I think we'll get better as time goes on and we get more experience.
Coach, another question coming in on the Nick Saban Show blog from AL.com. Mac is in Atlanta, and he talks about, Coach, annually recruiting a number of kids from the Atlanta area and the state of Georgia. Can you tell any added excitement during the week from our players, knowing that they're getting set to face folks in their hometown and their home state?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about the fact that, the guys from Georgia, this is obviously a big game for them. When we play A&M, the guys from Texas, it's a big game for them. If we'd have played USC, we got a couple California guys that would have been excited to play, in that game. So I don't think there's any question about that fact, that, guys really do get excited when they, get to go home and play, from their, like all the guys that we've had from Florida when we play Florida, they always get excited about that. So I don't think it's unique to Georgia. I think it's just pretty much the way it is, that it's like bragging rights, when you go home,
Sure.
all the people who would root for that particular team wherever you're from.
Yeah. Let's talk again about the Georgia Bulldogs, and maybe this is a crazy question, but over the last couple of games, A&M and the game last week against Ole Miss, the other team's tight ends had a degree of success. Kirby, statistically, if nothing else, has only thrown 8 passes all season to his 4 different tight ends. Uh, is there a temptation on their part to change that because of what we saw from Wiedemeyer and Yeboah the last couple games? Or do they just keep doing what they do?
Well, I can't answer that question for certain, but they have, 3 or 4 really, really good tight ends. And I think that they try to utilize them in their offense. Maybe they haven't gotten as many opportunities as they'd like, but they also have really good skill players outside.
That's true.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
who do you want to throw the ball to? Pickens or, um, Burton or, number 10 is a really, really good player. So they have really, really good skill guys. So I think everybody is trying to get the ball to their best players. If that best player happens to be the tight end, then that's why you throw the ball to the tight end. So
Gotcha.
I think we played 2 really good tight ends the last 2 weeks, and not really been very effective in some of the passes that Ole Miss threw to the tight end were really, really difficult to defend. I mean, they were running a running play that's a run blocking play, and the tight end runs lead and then runs right but past the linebacker down the middle. That's a really difficult play to defend. And then we missed a tackle on it early in the game, and the guy runs for 50 more yards. And the other big play he made, we missed a tackle on him, and he ran for 50 more yards. So I think you have to execute whatever it is that you're trying to do on defense to stop all the players that they have who can get the ball. And I think that the people that we played against the last 2 weeks had very good tight ends, and they utilized their skill really well, and we didn't do a very good job of defending it. And wouldn't surprise me if they try to get the ball to the tight ends, but I also think that I'm worried about covering their other skill guys who are very explosive as well.
Exactly. Pickens has played well. Kearis Jackson, you mentioned, number 10. He has been an outstanding a receiver as well. And they've got a darn good running back, Zamir White, number 3. I dare say we'll be mentioning his name a few times come Saturday night.
Well, they've got 3 or 4 good running backs. They play a lot of players. They play 3 or 4 different guys. Zeus is really a good player, though. He's strong, physical. He's got speed. He's tough, hard nosed, really, really good player. And we recruited him here, and we thought he was probably the best guy we were recruiting in his class that year. And he's really, really a good player, very productive.
Yeah, he's on the Doak Walker watch list. Oh, and by the way, speaking of watch lists, and Andy, I'll get right to you. Obviously, it was great to see Landon Dickerson's name added to the Remington Award watch list this week. No surprise. I mean, he's been awfully good.
He's played very well for us. He's a really good leader. He's smart. I think he's helped all the other offensive linemen sort of play better. They have confidence together as a group. And I'm always happy when our players get recognized for having an opportunity to win some of these awards.
Well, you mentioned Landon, and I'm curious. He's a transfer player. He started his career at Florida State. How tough is it to get someone into the flow of your system and how things work in your culture when they've come from another program?
Well, it depends on the guy. There's no problem at all for Landon because he's sort of cut from the cloth that we try to get our players to grow in. This guy's got great character, hard worker, hard-nosed, tough, sort of all the things that we try to build our foundation on. He is. So not a problem at all for a guy like that. So I think it's all about the person, what kind of person he is relative to what kind of program you have. I think if you have the kind of program that we try to have and you bring somebody in who's come from a program where they don't work hard and they don't do things, they don't practice, then that's a tough transition for a guy. Vice versa, if he came from a hard-working program and he comes into a laissez-faire program, that'll be a tough transition for a guy too. So I just think it's all, how does that guy's personality fit where he's going?
Devontae goes in motion. Here's the jet sweep. Nice blocking, Forrestall. Devontae's going to walk it in. Touchdown, Alabama! Thank you, Lord. What a night. 14 yards. It was just an honest emotion, that late touchdown, and I said, thank you, Lord. It was quite a night. But again, we cited right there, Coach, nice blocking by Miller Forrestall to help Devontae get gone.
Yeah, and Mechie had a nice block on that play too. So the perimeter blocking was really a key. It always is, to be able to block the defensive backs on the perimeter with your receivers. If you're going to run those plays, and they're complementary plays to running plays. So you're counting numbers on the perimeter. Are we going to run it or are we going to throw it out there? Well, if you throw it out there and you can't block the one-on-ones, they don't work very well. So our guys did a really good job of that last week.
Andy Staples, jump on in.
Well, I'm curious, Coach. You said something interesting last night when people were asking you about what happens Saturday and how does this all work. And you were talking about at practice this week that you've been able to do things remotely. The players understand the game plan. What is missing when the head coach isn't there? Is it because you're not a primary offensive or defensive play caller, but you're influencing everything? You're making decisions on, do you go for it on fourth down? Do you kick a field goal or go try to score a touchdown on the goal line? How does that change if you're not there?
Well, our contingency plan, because of the experience that we have on the staff, would be Sark is the guy that has been a head coach, has made those kind of decisions in the past. I think philosophically we're very close in terms of how we think about those kind of situations. He's a very bright guy. All the time that he did it as a head coach, he was a play caller, so it won't affect him from that standpoint. It won't take away from his play calling ability. But the protocol is, if you're in quarantine, you can't have any remote access to the sidelines, and you can't go to the game even if they put you in an isolated area. So never having thought much about that, and I'm not being critical of anybody here, if you're the head coach, there ought to be a better way to do it. I don't know exactly what that is, but there should be a better way to do that. You ought to be able to have some kind of communication with the sidelines, just like I have communication with somebody on the field during practice. I can't directly talk to a player, but I can say, hey, tell 22 that he was supposed to reroute the guy or whatever. So you can't have any of that. And that doesn't seem quite right. I think you could probably do without an assistant if you had to. Maybe a little harder if it's a coordinator who's calls the plays, and maybe you don't have somebody that's effective at doing that or experienced at doing that on your staff. But I just think it's really tough that if you have to make a close call, I would just hate to see somebody on our staff have to make a close call and get criticized for it if it didn't work, because I don't think that's fair to them, if you know what I mean. I mean, I make the call responsible for them. I get criticized. I understand the game. If you make a call and it works, it's a good call. If you make a call and it doesn't work, it's a bad call. All right, so it's as simple as that. I get that. All right. But, you know, if an assistant on your staff has to make one of those kind of calls, and it doesn't work, I'd hate to see someone have to get criticized for something that probably shouldn't even have been their responsibility to make that call to start with.
I have an idea, and my thing is, they've tweaked every other NCAA rule just for this year. So why not tweak this one? We take one of those robot tackling dummies, the remote control tackling dummy. We strap an iPad to it, and you're set up just like you are now, except you've also got the game on TV. You can see what's going on, and you just roam around the sideline on that thing. And if a position coach does something you don't like, you might maybe you bump them a little bit. But it does. It's amazing to me, in all seriousness, that they've tweaked rules for everything else, but why not tweak this a little bit?
Well, there's smarter people than me in positions to make those sort of determinations. And I'm not being critical of anybody, but I would hate not to be at the game on Saturday if that's what this turns out to be. And I would hate not to be, at least to have a headset where I could communicate with the sidelines, even if you're in the press box in isolation. Even if you couldn't go in the locker room and communicate with the players, you could still Zoom with the players. So there's ways to do this where you wouldn't be putting anybody in harm's way. But, I also really believe in the safety of all the people, not just the players on our team or the coaches. So there would have to be some logistical things that could be worked out so that you could do something like that.
Coach, do you ever get a chance, maybe you do, maybe you don't, to read any of the work after the season of a guy like Andy and fellas who analyze football? He says, no, you don't. Do you ever get a chance,
He has
maybe
so many better things to do, Eli.
in the summertime, to pick up the sports papers and magazines and see what these guys write about?
I really don't. Not that it has anything to do with Andy. I read a book. I always am reading a book.
Right.
So, and a lot of times the book is might be about football or sports or motivation or, sometimes it's just a good story about something that you kind of get into. But it's a way to get lost for a little bit, even if I only read 4 or 5 pages a day in 5 minutes or something. But most of the stuff that I read, it's something to try to help me be better at what I do.
Right.
So, and I just not really into opinions and speculations about things. And I like to read factual stuff, and I like to read stuff that people write that maybe is a different point of view that could be beneficial. And Andy probably does some of that, but
I read a lot of that too.
Yeah.
Sometimes people send me something and say, "Hey, you should read this," and I read it. But most of it has to do something about human behavior and how to motivate somebody or try to get somebody to do something better.
What are a couple of the books that you've read in the last few years that really stand out to you?
Obstacle is the Way. I've read 3 of Ryan Holiday's books. That's the first one. He spoke to the team probably 4 or 5 years ago. Toughness is one that Jay Billis's book. I'm reading a book now, Chicken Runs at Midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So
that was a great book.
And a true story, and probably worth reading. So it's really about a baseball player from Steubenville who comes up in the minor leagues and becomes a third base coach for Jim Leland and for the Pirates and then the Marlins. And I guess what it made it interesting for me, having worked for Wayne Huizinga for 2 years, that was his '97 Marlins team that won the World Series, which is what the saying, the chicken runs at midnight, that's what it's all about. You never know that until the end, but it's really kind of interesting, and it has a lot of compassion in it because of family and stuff like that. So I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I read that book. It was spectacular. Let me ask you about people. I've been blessed over the years. I had a chance to sit down and talk with Eddie Robinson, the great coach at Grambling. And the same thing with John Wooden, the magnificent basketball coach at UCLA. And when we were done with these interviews, I walked out of those studios, and I said, "My goodness, what a blessing to sit with these guys, and how spectacular was that?" Have you ever had a chance? Is there a name or two that come to mind for you that you've met in your travels and your business, and when it was done, you said, "Man, that was pretty cool"?
Well, there's been quite a few, but I did read John Wooden's book
Mm-hmm.
way back when I first started coaching, and it did have a significant impact on some of the philosophical things about, just you're developing a person, you're not just developing a player. And if you develop a person the right way, they'll play better because they'll be a more complete player, a better competitor. But Wayne Huizenga was one of the premier people from a character standpoint that I've ever been associated with, in my life. The guy was a phenomenal in terms of what he accomplished in his life, building 3 Fortune 500 companies, but did it with total humility.
Yep.
I mean, total humility. You would never know the guy had 10 cents and started with one garbage truck and built Waste Management. And, the story always amazed me was he sold Pier 66, or one of his big properties in Fort Lauderdale. And his favorite restaurant was on right by the 17th Street Bridge. And he didn't want to sell the restaurant because he didn't want any people to lose their jobs. So he made a promise when he sold it that they wouldn't get rid of the restaurant or any of the people in it. 30 days later, the people came to him and said, "We got our pink slips today. They're going to tear our restaurant down." He went back and bought it back so nobody would lose their job.
Really?
I mean, amazing man.
Well, Coach, I wanted to ask you about Mac Jones. I talked to him briefly last week, and we were talking about the Auburn game last year.
I think we
believe-
In his situation now, he can't imagine throwing those. That he, at the time, he was thinking like a backup quarterback trying to win the job, and you can't throw the ball away on 3rd and 8, or you can't throw the ball away near the goal line or take a sack. And he said now he understands kind of the bigger picture of things. So I wanted to ask you about his maturation through the offseason and kind of taking over this job.
Well, I think the big thing is I always tell our quarterbacks, if every possession ends in a kick, we're going to be good. Could be a punt, could be a field goal, could be an extra point. But when you turn it over and you give it to the other guys, that usually is disastrous. And I think when you're a young quarterback and you press, I think the worst thing you can do is, in any sport, is to press. And when you do that, you try to make plays that aren't there. And I think sometimes you do it because you put pressure on yourself. Sometimes you think you have to do it because you want to impress somebody else, rather than just sort of see a little, see a lot, see what you're supposed to see, do what you're supposed to see with the ball, do with the ball, take what the defense gives you, and move on. And if it's 3rd and 8 and you have to punt, that's not the end of the world. We'll get another chance. So I think the more players get experience and the more they have confidence, they sort of understand that. They understand that it's not worth trying to fit it in there when the guy's not open or that's not your read, because those plays can be disastrous, and turnovers have the most significant impact on the outcome of the game. Not only
Obviously, we're having a little transmission problem from the coach there at the house, and we'll see if his Wi-Fi settles down just a bit. Coach, you back with us?
I don't know. I didn't know I was gone.
Well, try and talk, Andy, but it's not a language that you or I are able to understand, unfortunately. But why don't we take a moment right here to preview from your eyes, Andy, what we're likely to see at Bryant-Denny Stadium this Saturday night?
I think we're going to see an improved performance from the Alabama defense, because this is probably an offense that they're a little more used to seeing. What Lane Kiffin and Jeff Lebby have cooked up at Ole Miss is a pretty interesting hybrid offense where they mix in concepts from what Lane did when he was at Alabama and what Jeff Lebby did at Baylor and did at UCF. And it's a tough offense to stop, especially if it's not something you've seen before. These guys have seen what Georgia does before. Now, the difference is Georgia does it with some of the best players in America, some of the players that Alabama also recruited. And that's a matchup I want to see. But what I really want to see is the matchup between this Alabama offensive line and that Georgia defensive front, because Georgia's been fantastic. It's basically the same guys that played last year. The only team that really scored on them was LSU last year. And this offense at Alabama is very good. It's up there with that LSU offense in terms of just a quality of line, the playmaking receivers, a couple great backs, a quarterback who knows what he's doing. I'm really excited to see that matchup because it's best on best, and that's what you love to watch.
What you want to see.